Macron is the symbol of those deep contradictions, that to use this word figuratively, he can only escape the political guillotine for some time. It may take 1 or 2 years, but I think that ultimately he will be forced out of office, or he will see the wisdom of leaving office. The contradictions are so deep that he cannot afford the luxury of just hanging in there, because sometimes hanging in there is not the solution. But he may also want to stay in power. And if he does, I think he's going to be confronted with situations that are not going to be very pretty. We have seen what happened to George Floyd. We have seen what happens to black people. And we have seen the systemic way in which all these are articulated and executed. Even when one begins to talk about discontent, it must be given a historical context. Discontent is brewed when there is discrimination and injustice. And you can see it even when you trace the history of Europe and even outside of Europe. If you look at the Young Turks Revolution in Turkey in 1908, the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, the French Revolution itself in the early days, the revolutions in France and the riots in France in 1958, the riots in 1968, the Tiananmen Square in 1980, the South Korean riots, the Sharpeville Massacre in 1966, the Soweto massacres in 1976, and one can go on. And then you can see what is now happening in France, the riots which have been ignited by that senseless killing by a police officer of a young 17-year-old who was not resisting. Footages now demonstrate. It tells you that there was a volcano. And in the case of France, that volcano has been there for a long time. There have been migrants to France. If you go to cities such as Marseille, you will be surprised at the population of Moroccans, Aboriginal Moroccans and Algerians who are there. If you are in Paris and Nantes and Lyon, you'll be surprised at the number of Africans who have migrated to France and who are now French citizens. Yet the French system is a system that is still controlled by a few racist Caucasians who run the political machine and who have created a policing system that is inclined towards dealing with non-indigens to mean Caucasians on the basis that they are guilty until they prove themselves innocent. As long as that is the culture that dominates in France, then the riots are just but the logical outcome of it. For 5 days on, the country cannot operate. Of course, it pains one when individuals' properties are destroyed through looting and all, but it is the language, rioting is the language of the unheard. If you have been speaking loudly for a long time, then violence becomes the language of the unheard. And it is a lesson to France. In fact, this is unfair to say, but I'll say it. For France, the chicken are coming home to roost. They are now being reminded of what they did to Guinea in 1958. They are being reminded of what they did to Algeria. They are being reminded of what they did in Indonesia and other parts of the world. I hope that this very painful lesson is going to send a clear message to the French administration that the time is now to accept and acknowledge that the injustices that are inbuilt in the French system will be dealt with and dealt with satisfactorily with people participation. And it's also a warning to other countries in Europe. Spain had better look. Portugal had better be on the lookout. Italy had better be on the lookout. Greece had better be on the lookout. It is a message that is being sent to Europe. If you don't style up, and you don't treat other human beings like human beings, and you call them animals, then with due respect to animals, they'll behave like animals.
So now, welcome back to this YouTube channel. If you are coming across this channel for the first time, thank you so much for clicking. Please take a minute to subscribe to this channel so that we can have more discussions like this. So for the returning subscribers and those who watch this channel frequently, thank you so much for keeping it locked, and let's get it started. So after the colonial period ended, many of the colonizers returned back to their countries. We had Britain in Kenya, we had France in the West Africa, and several European countries that were colonizing Africa. So after the period ended, most of these colonizers went back to their country and left their respective states to govern themselves. However, for France, this was not the case, as they still wanted to control the economies of their colonies or the countries that they were in, mostly in the West Africa. As you can see, for the cases in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, the France still had roots in the country and still were in some way controlling their banking, their currency, their resources, their minerals, and all that. But it did not do it directly. They were doing this by making some shady deals with the, corrupt government officials in the top positions in the government in these countries. So over the past few years, we have seen these West African countries pulling off from the French slavery that they've been in for a long time. As you can see in the case of Burkina Faso through Captain Ibrahim Traore, the case of Mali and Niger. So yeah, that is our topic of discussion today. But before we have some explanation on that, and I give my honest opinion on that, let us watch these few clips that I'm going to play next, and then at the end of it all, we'll round it up with my own honest discussion on this topic. Yeah, so that is it. Keep it locked, and I'll see you in the end.
Guys, the French government has just officially collapsed, and now the country is on the brink of nationwide protests. In fact, the French population is so frustrated with the government's instability and negligence that they are now planning massive shutdowns with the aim to halt the country's entire economy for a day, saying, "Let's block everything." You see, last night was unbelievable. France kicked out the country's 4th prime minister in just 12 months, leading people to describe the country as ungovernable. That is a wild sentence right there. And now, without a prime minister, the government has ground to a halt, forcing the president, Emmanuel Macron, to find yet another replacement. And now, considering the situation, there are also growing calls for President Macron himself to be removed, and his critics are saying that he is clinging on to power and he is unable to govern effectively. And honestly, tomorrow's planned strikes could be a breaking point in this tension across the country. So I guess I'll keep you guys updated on how it all unfolds.
So the French government has fallen again, but international news media is going to be very shy about telling us the real reason why it's fallen, the economic reasons why it's fallen. On his way out, the ousted Prime Minister, Mr. Francois, said, "You might kick me out, you might remove me, but that does not change the economic problems for the country." I'm paraphrasing. The real reason why France has failed as a government is because Africa has taken its power back. Ever since the country of Niger in the Sahel, in Central West Africa, decided to nationalize its uranium, France has never been the same again. This uranium that state-owned companies like Orano, French-owned companies like Orano had been siphoning, stealing under the previous government. Today, Niger turned off the faucet. Niger said no more. So Niger, under the new governance of President Tiani, is nationalizing its uranium. This uranium France was stealing not only to light its beautiful cities like Paris and Nice, it was also using it to run its electrical manufacturing and industries, all of these are processing and running their nuclear reactors on top of it all. So these things that are the foundations of an economy, like manufacturing and processing, right now that the electricity in France, their energy is not safe, they do not have a reliable place to get their energy from, this is why they're suffering. But it's not going to be told that way on international news media. You're only going to hear it from people like me and others who are truth tellers. So yeah, this is why. This is what happens. This is proof that African leaders are in service of either them or us.
That's France right now. Because the Africans said no more exploitation. They're burning. The country is in a wreck. Yeah, this is happening right now in France. There's an online movement. It started online, it's moved into person. It's called Block Everything. They're blocking access to everything. Go search France, Paris right now. The whole fucking country is on fire. They're they're burning everything. Simply because the Africans said no more exploitation. If you want to understand what this is, I need you to imagine, I'm going to use a sexual reference. I need you to imagine that guy that has that woman that he always takes advantage of, that never says no. She doesn't like it, but she never says no. And every time he comes around, he's feeling on her, grabbing on her. And then one day she summons up the courage to say no. And he starts throwing a tantrum. What do you mean I can't touch you? What do you mean I can't fuck you? That's exactly what's going on right now.
France is now ungovernable. You better believe it. France is now ungovernable. The country that actually made its money from bleeding black people. The country that forced Haiti to pay 150 billion for their freedom. And one of the reasons why Haiti is still in the situation it is right now is because of France. France, the country that bled Africa, making sure that the countries that it colonized basically had to pay a colonial tax for being colonized. That country, the country that one of the biggest slave traders in the world, that country has run out of money. They cannot afford to pay the pensions. They cannot afford the healthcare system. Literally, France is literally on the verge of economic collapse. And this is serious. France is in worse trouble than Greece was, except at the time the European Union was so powerful at the time. But now, the European Union was weakened by Brexit. The European Union has been weakened by Trump turning against them. So now the European Union, they're just running around like headless chickens. They cannot even bail France out. France is literally on the verge of collapse. And coming close after France is going to be the UK and Germany.
After several African nations kicked France out of their countries, France is falling apart. Now, you probably remember in the past couple of years, many African countries have been kicking the French out of their countries. Now, this included countries like Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. And things haven't been going well for the French economy ever since. Just last week, the French Prime Minister resigned because he just couldn't fix the economy. So how did we get here? Well, let's dive in. Now, in the late 1900s, many European countries started to leave Africa after they had controlled and colonized it for a couple of hundreds of years. But not France. France left, but only in name. In reality, France was still running things and they still kept control of all of these West African countries. France still controlled 14 countries in Africa. Now, so what France was doing here was that they signed agreements with governments of these countries, either through bribery or through negotiation without actually exposing the downsides of the agreement. So negotiating in bad faith. So this agreement said that these countries needed to keep most of their reserves in the French currency and it needs to be kept in France. And also, now the central bank that ran the currencies of all of these countries had a French representative who had a veto power. Now this means that these countries couldn't make decisions of their own long-term investments because France will always have a veto power to say, no, I don't think you should do that. Now this includes investments inside their own country. So if they wanted to build a road, they wanted to build schools, they couldn't just access their reserves because their reserves, more than half of them, 65%, were kept in France. Now, when the France defend themselves, they said that this benefited these countries because their currencies didn't fluctuate, because their currencies were linked to the franc. But this also meant that if things are going bad in France, the currencies of these countries also lose value, which meant that any bad decision that France does will definitely have huge consequences on the currencies and the economies of these countries. So in a nutshell, these countries were propping up the French economy. Now, on top of that, France was also taking a large amount of resources. So 30% of France's uranium that it used to produce electricity was mined in Niger, but more than 90% of the people in Niger didn't even have electricity. Now, there were also mining companies that were coming from France, digging up the gold and buying it at a very cheap amount, because remember, they maintained their control of the value of the currency between the franc and those countries' currencies. And then they would take them and then sell them at a higher price to the rest of the world. Now, starting about 5 to 6 years ago, there started to be a resistance in these countries. That's when military coups came in. That's when we saw the rise of people like Ibrahim Traore and other leaders around the region. Now, these leaders, when they came in, they cancelled most of these contracts. But on top of that, they removed that veto power that allowed France to veto anything that these countries wanted to do economically. Now, this came with a huge burden on the French economy. So starting from 2022, when they started to see that the show is about to end, they started to put in measures to try to prop up their own economy. Now, the other problem they have is that most Western countries, including those in Europe, those in Asia, like Japan, South Korea, and also the United States, they have an aging population. This means that there's a lot of people who are about to go on retirement, and there's no one who's going to come and replace those people in the job market. Now, this is very bad, because when you retire, you're no longer producing anything that helps the country, but at least there will be someone who comes in and take on your place, who will be taxed, and that tax money will be used to prop up the economy, to build roads that you are going to use, even though you're no longer contributing to the economy. This includes your retirement. So the money that gets deducted from your account is not being stored in a single account, and then when you retire, they're going to take it and give it to you. It's being used for investment. It's being used to build things. And the process here is that when it's your time to retire, the money will be taken from those who are going to be working at that time, and it will be used to pay you off when you retire and cash out. But the problem in many Western countries is that many people are about to retire, but there's no people who are going to come in and replace them. That's why those countries had to seek out workers from Asia and Africa. That's why you saw a lot of people who migrated overseas to go there and work, including me. It's because they're trying to replace aging population. So France has the same problem. So what they did is that the first step that they did, I think it was 2022 or 2023, they came out and they said that they're going to rise the age of retirement. So instead of retiring at 60, they increased it to retiring at 62. That means that they have delayed the amount of time that they need to cash out those people who are retiring. And also, they're adding 2 more years to those people who are working to add more value into the economy and contribute. They also increased it from that to 64, but that will only be implemented, I think, in 2030. So as you can see, they're trying to solve the problems, but that wasn't enough. France also have a very huge deficit. This means that the amount of money that they are collecting from tax is less than the amount that they are spending in the public spending, things like schools, roads, administration, and all of those other things that the governments need to do. So what do? They borrow. And now France also has the highest borrowing in Europe. So they've been borrowing a large amount of money, and it's becoming very difficult now to pay back that money back. On top of that, because of all of these problems, France's credit rating has lowered, which means that now whenever they go to borrow, they're going to have to pay even more money. So what they did is they came with a plan. The plan included removing 2 holidays. They are saying that we have 2 holidays, we need to remove them. People need to be working on those holidays. That will produce more money for the economy, and we can use it to reduce the amount of debt. People were having none of that. They were like, no, you're not going to take away my holidays. Just think as a South African, for example, if they say June 16th is being taken away, the 1st of May is being taken away, definitely you will have something to say about that, and you won't be happy. Now, on top of that, they're saying that they're going to cut public spending. The money that is being spent on welfare, the money that is paid to people who are like old or people who are unable to work for themselves, they want to cut that. And people are not happy about it, so they came out. So the Prime Minister went to Parliament and said, guys, this is the plan, this is how we're gonna do it. Who is agreeing with me, who's not agreeing with me? And then he challenged them to a vote of no confidence, in which he lost, and then he was removed. So that's how bad things are in France right now. The economy is not doing well, they don't have a way out, people are angry, people are resisting, but something has to be done. It's either you need to cut on the spending, or you need to increase tax, or you need to work more. It's one of those. There's no other way. So we're going to see how people are going to react, and I'll keep you updated on this story. If you like this kind of story, please repost this video. Just go there on the share and then press repost. And then to support me, go to my YouTube channel and subscribe, and I'm going to see you there.
the France that you see now is a France that is built on the back of those colonies. They were harsh because their very survival depended on these colonies. And their harshness can be seen when on the eve of independence in African countries, they signed the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. The yes-no vote for French colonies to decide whether after so-called independence they would retain connection and connectivity with Paris. They gave everybody the opportunity to vote yes or no, but they did not want you to vote no. So that when Guinea voted no under Ahmed Sékou Touré, when they were leaving, they destroyed everything that was capable of being destroyed. Modibo Keïta, in what was then the French Sudan, now Mali, they destroyed everything. Algeria, the pogrom in Algeria, when they were leaving, then led by Ahmed Ben Bella, they destroyed everything. The other countries, they continue to control. As we speak, the currencies of all former French colonies are still printed in France, CFA franc. Their cruelty, I think, comes out of a big psychological burden, which they visit, transfer of aggression. It is painful. You can see even as we speak during the coup d'etats in Africa, the arrogance. You tell a country which is equal in international law that we have accredited our ambassador, we do not care. France, the home of revolution, the home of coup d'etats at one time, can not recognize a revolution when it's taking place, and they say, accept our ambassador. We don't accept the revolution. That is France for you. Arrogance. The most arrogant of the colonial powers. You know, the history of France is the history of how the arrogance fall. Is, if you allow me, the school bully who takes lunch from every little boy and little girl thinks that he is invincible. Then one day, the little boy says, today you are not taking my lunch. And what the little boy does is to hit you when you did not expect. And you find yourself on the ground and everybody is laughing at you. France did not see what is happening in West Africa coming. So they find themselves at a time when they are very weak economically, when at home the population of immigrants is growing bigger and bigger. You go to cities such as Marseille, you find Algerians, you find Moroccans, you find Senegalese, you find Guineans, you find Burkinabe, and things are not happening as they used to be. Then, in the former colonies that you thought you are controlling, a breed of young men and women begin rising. They rise in Guinea-Conakry, and the first thing they do is they say, we abolish all the agreements that exist between us and France. They rise in Burkina Faso and they say the same thing. They rise in Mali and they say the same thing. They rise in Niger, which has been providing you with uranium. Now you can't take it. I think they cannot take it because they are losing food which has been inside of their mouth, and they do not know how to behave. As somebody once said, without Africa, there is no France. Without our former colonies, give France only 20 years, and it will be one of the poorest nations in the continent of Europe. And that is going to happen. And they are resisting because for them this is life and death. But the stars, which I can now perfectly read, are telling me that their goose is cooked, and very well cooked. After the World War II, which I prefer to call the European Tribal War, what then happened is that many of these colonizers, France included, started to lose their luster and to lose their grip. And that grip was lost even more because the United States became the new hegemon. So when you look at France today, you see a France which, courtesy of our colonial past, accommodated people from different parts of our colonies. You find very large Algerian communities, very large Senegalese communities, very large Cote d'Ivoirian communities. And these communities cannot be ignored because of the demographies, and they are threatening the French indigents. And that is why you've seen that since the emergence of the administration of Macron, there have been very major difficulties, and these difficulties must be understood at several levels. One, you have a France that has lost her access to minerals in our former colonies. Two, you have a France which is diplomatically weak. Three, you have a France which within the European context does not play the role that she thinks she should play as one of the key players. You have a France where the internal contradictions are threatening every administration. And in that context, you must see the emergence of the right wingers such as the Le Pen, both the father and the daughter. So all those contradictions are coming to bear. And because they are happening during the administration of President Macron, he is seen as the architect of the failure of France. And seen from that perspective, he himself is beginning to reassert himself. And what way to reassert yourself than to use the crises that have emerged since your administration? And there are several crises. Crisis number one, that you have had the emergence of changes of power which are extra-constitutional in Niger, in Mali, in Burkina Faso. And what have they done? They have said, you are no longer going to take our uranium in the manner that you did. We are no longer going to have France or French as our only language. We are going to choose who to work with, and we are no longer going to be obedient servants within La Francophonie. We are no longer going to use CFA franc, which you control.
So now, thank you so much for keeping it up until the end. And just to mention that the videos that I've compiled here are not my original videos, and credit belongs to the original producers. Mine is only to use them for commentary purposes and, for education purposes only. So I've attached their handles for the entire clips so that if you maybe want to check them out, you can check them out from their respective pages. However, a few things are coming out from the videos that you watched. And the number one is that the French government is on the brink of collapsing. Number one, because of their economic struggles. Since many African countries that were associated with France are currently moving away from them, and we have the cases of Mali, Guinea, Niger, Burkina Faso, and all those countries. That means France cannot get the resources that initially they used to get from these countries. For example, uranium that used to come from, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and the gold in Niger and all that. That means their economy is not doing good. Number one. Number two, we have a France that is diplomatically weak. The European Union somehow feels that France, being one of the veto powers, is not playing its part in the union as it should, and that brings some sort of issues in the unions. And then also it's important to note that many of these European countries, like GBP, France, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Greece, their economies were built solely based on the resources that they got from Africa. That is, they used to get their gold, uranium, silver, and all that from Africa, then transported all the way to Europe. process them, and then use them to develop their countries. But now that is not the case, as most of the African countries are standing up for themselves, and they can no longer get these resources freely from these African countries, which is a good thing, because there is somehow an economic shift such that these resources are now going to be used for the development of these African countries. And we're going to see a situation whereby Africa is going to be more developed than Europe. I'm not saying this to hate or anything. For a long time, many of the people from Africa have been going to Europe to look for, better opportunities like for work, health, and all that. But here comes a time by where now all this is going to transfer to Africa. And now, just to mention that since this is happening to France, and it can no longer sustain itself without this support and these resources and minerals that it got from Africa, then maybe it's a wake-up call for these other countries from the European Union, maybe Italy, Portugal, Europe, and GDP, that they too, they did the same things as France, and they benefited from that. But now it's all shifting, and very soon and eventually it will get to them. So yeah, that is it on my thoughts. What do you think about this whole situation? Share with me your thoughts down below in the comment section, and let's have a discussion. So thank you so much for watching. Please take a minute to like, subscribe, and share to this channel so that I get motivated to produce more content like this. So cheers, and see you guys in the next one.